and we'll go into this topic over here in Vav. Ena Pesach ba el la'achila. The whole purpose of eating Korban Pesach, by the way, aside, Pesach was brought, unlike all the other sacrifices, specifically for eating. Even a shlomim, a feast offering or a peace offering, whichever one you want to translate it. Okay, that's mostly eaten by the person who brought the korban and the people with whom he shares the korban, right? Okay. And that's a central part of, let's say, the Thanksgiving offering. A person needs to bring thanks to God, so he does that. Or on holidays, the main simcha, there's shalmei simcha, shalmei chagiga, brought on holidays. People are supposed to celebrate in the temple before God by eating meat. And according to the Rambam, that's even when women are supposed to eat meat. If you're outside the temple, it's Yontif, so you have Simchas Yontif. So Simchas Yontif for men is eating meat and drinking wine, right? And for women, it's new clothes. And for children, it's treats. For men, specifically, it's eating meat and wine. But when you go to the temple on a pilgrimage, even though women don't have an obligation to engage in the pilgrimage, because it's a time-bound positive commandment, they're still supposed to eat of the meat. Their husbands are supposed to share the meat with them, so they could also do simcha. When you're in the temple, in the Jerusalem, men, women, and children all eat sacrificial meat, and that's the simcha. And by the way, without wine. Doesn't say anything you have to eat to do with wine. Okay? You have to bring the lady. And it's proper to share one's sacrificial feast, his festival feast, with the Levi and the widow and the orphan and the pauper, because you're supposed to, like Rambam says, if a person has a holiday meal and doesn't also, gladden the hearts of those who who have less, then it's just a sudas kreso. He's just satisfying his belly, but he's not satisfying God in that respect. Either way, so but Korban Pesach is more than the other korbanos. It's supposed to be eaten. The Mishnah in Pesachim Zayin Dalet says this, that there are 5 things that are brought betuma. If everybody's tameh, well, which we discussed before, so the temple service continues, right? Just forget about it. Everybody's tameh mace. We're just going to go ahead with the service, even if tameim go into the temple and they continue the service. But ve'nechalin betuma, but they cannot be eaten in tuma. It means these things were brought, but the portions that were supposed to be eaten by the kohanim or regular people are just not eaten. So the Omer, second day of Passover, the new barley grain is brought, right? And that's turned into a mincha that the kohanim eat. No, if all the kohanim are tameh, it's just brought but not eaten. Ushtei alechem, and the 2 breads that are brought on Shavuos, right? This is 2 wheat breads that are actually leavened and they're brought on Shavuos. The kohanim eat them. But if everybody's tameh, the ritual is done, temple service is done, but these 2 breads aren't eaten. Lechem apanim, the showbread on Shabbos. Yeah, everything that's not eaten is burned. Lechem apanim. Normally, the showbread is eaten properly, but betara, impurity, by the kohanim who are on duty that Sabbath. Last Sabbath's breads are eaten on this Sabbath, and then they put on new bread. Right? They just switch out the breads, and the old breads that are week old are eaten by the kohanim. But if they're all tameh, so the bread isn't eaten. Zivchei shamei tzibur. Zivchei Shami Tzibur, that's referring to what's also brought on Shavuos. These feast offerings that are brought on behalf of the community with the 2 breads. Those are usually eaten by Kohanim, but instead they're going to be burned. Us'irei Roshei Chodashim, and the he-goats that are brought on new moons. Every Rosh Chodesh, there's a Seir Chatat, a he-goat brought as a sin offering, or as a purification offering. I think that'd be the more correct translation, as we explained before. So these are normally eaten, but if there's tumah on the base of mikdash, the meat has been contaminated, the kohanim are contaminated, they can't eat it. Ha-pesach sheba betuma, nechal betuma. However, if the pesach was brought betuma, it is eaten. It is the only sacrificial meat that's eaten betuma, as we saw last year. Shelo ba mitchilato ela la'achila. It was only brought to be eaten. Wait a minute, aren't other korbanos meant to be eaten? Shlomim, you just said. A toda is meant to be eaten. A shlomim that's meant to be eaten. Zivchei shalmi tzibur. What else are they supposed to do besides eat them? No, Korban Pesach is more to be eaten than all the other korbanos. Make sense? Yeah, so that's the first nafkamina. In the 10th parak, in the 6th Mishnah, we have here the text of the bracha that is said, that concludes for the conclusion of what's called the Magid, the recitation of the Haggadah, right? Pick up a cup of wine right before the second cup. We saw this bracha, and this is something that we adjusted the text for Haggadah Pesach. Why? Because it has 2 versions. There's the version said with Korban Pesach on the table. And there's the version said without the Korban Pesach. So part of the text is V'esk Hashem. Rabbi Kiva Mosif. Rabbi Kiva's version of the bracha continues. Kein Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoteinu Yagienu lirgaim u'moadim achrim habayim likrothenu shalom. So too, God, bring us to more festivals and appointed times. Okay, that come upon us in peace. We want to see more holidays. Smechin b'vinyani recha v'sasim ba'avodatecha. Celebrating in the rebuilding of your city. Okay, joyous in your service. Lechol min hazvachim u'min hapsachim she'agia damam al kirmiz b'chachal ratzon. To eat of the zvachim, those are the shlomim that are brought on Korban Pesach, and the psachim she'agia damam al kirmiz b'chachal ratzon. Okay, we want to. Why? Why do we want to keep other holidays? So we get to eat the Korban Pesach, whose blood is applied to the wall of thine altar, okay, with favor. And we shall thank you and know through a new song upon our redemption. Okay, Baruch Ato Hashem Gal Yisrael. So you see here, there's that halacha also says that Korban Pesach is meant to be eaten. Okay, so the next Mishnah talks about who's disqualified for Korban Pesach. He says here, who can't you include in your group for Korban Pesach? A sick person and an old person who are incapable of eating. By old, it meant he's so old that maybe he doesn't have teeth left, for example, right? Or he has some sort of malady that prevents him from eating meat. Okay? It means it's real extreme cases. Ein shochatim alehem. Okay, we don't want the Pesach to be brought from them. In the 8th parak, in the 7th Mishnah, we have here that you shouldn't, okay, shouldn't make a Korban Pesach for just one person. Rabbi Rossi Matir, Rabbi Yehuda forbids. Why? He's not going to eat, to eat all of it, wasting the food. By the way, normally a shlomim you're not so worried about because a person could share a shlomim with anybody else who's pure. All right, you don't have to worry. No shlomim, no korban toda brought by one person. What do you mean? One person brings a korban toda. He has a lot of friends with whom to share it. Korban Pesach, though, can only be eaten by the people specifically designated to eat this one Korban Pesach, so you can't do it for one individual. They say even if the group is 100 people, 100 people, but they're not going to be eating kazesim, okay? You can't do it for them. That's not connected to what we're trying to say right now. The Tosefta has a line here, okay? The Tosefta draws a distinction between the Korban Pesach and other korbanos, okay? Says here, Rabbi Yeshua says, "Kos vachim shebatorah shenitma basar v'chalam kayamim zorekat adam." Okay. All the other zvachim mentioned in the Torah that have been contaminated. If the meat and the fats still exist, you should still throw the blood. Okay, still apply the blood to the altar. Ala chalavim shenitmu chalavim v'abasar kayam zorekat adam ala basar. Okay, if you still have some of the basar left, so at least apply the blood there. While Pesach eno came. Even if the meat has been contaminated, but the entrails, the chalav, they're going to be on the base of mikdash, on the mizbeach, are still there. The Korban Pesach has only been brought to be eaten, so you need the basar. When we look at the Korban Pesach, we look at the basar. Okay, nitmu chalavim babasar kayam. So if the parts that's supposed to be burned on the altar, but the meat still exists, if there's enough meat so that everybody who originally participated in the Korban Pesach can still have a kazayas of meat, so put the blood on the altar. The korban still works. See, Korban Pesach is different because it's meant to be eaten. The Rambam says also this halacha, right? He brings this halacha she'ena Pesach ba ela la'achila, and the Rambam also says in the 7th parak, Pesach shekrivuhu betuma harezen echal tohor shemitchilato lo ba ela la'achila. The only reason for Pesach is that it should be eaten. And if any other korban brought betuma, don't eat it. Pesach brought betuma needs to be eaten because that's the whole purpose. Alone among all the other sacrifices, the purpose of Pesach is to be eaten. By the way, I haven't found a pasuk for this. Yeah, it's meant to be eaten more than any other korban that we have. By the way, if you want to close this window, you can. I don't know why the curtain's holding it open. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Normally, if I was here and I wasn't talking, I'd be cold also. That's why I have my sweater with me. I have 3 sweaters, but that never really comes to that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So Rav Kook, this is one of the first things I read. Dr. Shapiro put this out online originally from some of Rav Kook's more obscure writings. That Rav Kook saw this difference. Korban Pesach, he found a way that eventually, Rav Kook had this vegetarian utopian vision of the future and how the sacrifices would fundamentally change, a lot less animal sacrifice in the future. Why? Because it's supposed to be for Reach Nicholach. All the other sacrifices are Kapara, Reach Nicholach, Chatas, Asham, etc. They're for a purpose. And it's supposed to be a pleasing aroma to God. And eventually, he's going to be a Sheval Tasan. This is that Chazal will, the future Chazal, okay? Chachamenu, Chachamenu, Lusty Lava, whatever the acronym there is. So the future Chachamim, future Sanhedrin will eventually have drashas that will that won't disallow, but will allow us to get around offering the sacrifices. The only thing he couldn't find was Korban Pesach, because Korban Pesach is not a Reach Nicholach, it's not a Chatas, it's not all the other things we discussed last week. It's meant to be eaten. Okay, the taste. The Korban Pesach, the point of Korban Pesach is that it tastes like Pesach in your mouth.
You explain a chatat.
What? So chatat is, what are you going to do? So they can't eat it. So at least some of it's burned on the altar. Chatas brought betuma, so instead of eating it, it's burned. That most of the chatas, it's a chiddush. Normally, an olah, everything is burned, right? Okay. When a chatas, some is burned, some is eaten by the kohanim. The act of the kohanim eating is like it's being burned on the altar.
Yeah, but I remember being a part where
kohanim ochlim balim is kaprim.
Yeah. Part of the achil of the kohen is a very integral part of the
yes.
Kapara for someone who brings the chatat.
Yes, but he still is mechaper even if they don't eat, as long as the blood is applied. Okay, but for Korban Pesach, it's not like that. The Rama says in Bias Mikdash, "Chusmin Pesach levad shehu ochel la'erev k'moshet bayar b'mkomo." Okay, it says here the onain. We're going to see this also. There's a way that if he's an onain on erev Pesach, that he could eat the Korban Pesach that night. And the Rambam's going to make a distinction. Depends on when he became an onain, in the afternoon or in the morning. So God willing, do this.